So I would like to introduce, it's a delight to have Heidi Taylor Caudle and she's a curator as well as a historian at the John James Audubon Museum located in the Audubon State Park in Henderson. Heidi shares the life and works of John James Audubon through exhibits, articles, lectures. She has a master's of library science from the University of Kentucky and a Master of Art and Art History from the University of Louisville. And we're delighted to have her here as part of the Newburgh Museum speaking series. Please welcome Heidi.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and to be talking about Audubon's time in Henderson. I know that's right across the river, but it's still in the local area. So I'll just step over here and we'll get started. So Audubon, in addition to being an artist, was also an excellent writer. And he recorded a lot of his thoughts from his time as a young man, his middle age, his memoirs. And this is actually taken from an account that he wrote to his son Victor about a year after he left Henderson. And he acknowledges that Henderson saw his best days, his happiest, but he was intended to meet many events of a disagreeable nature. So what we're going to talk about today is his time in Henderson from 1810 to 1819, about the happiness that he had there with his family, his young sons, his wife, and also some of the tragic events that happened that spurred him to go on to do the Birds of America. So this is one of those illustrations of Audubon that came up much later in the 19th century, showing him as larger than life, displaying him with the birds that he was so well known for illustrating. And, here's just some of the pictures that you can see how stunning that his illustrations were. This is what he is most well known for the Birds of America, which was a collection of 500 prints of different birds across North America that he came across. But anyway, before he reached this level of fame, before he was publishing the Birds of America, he came up from kind of a background that should have seen him not becoming famous. We're going to talk about his early years on into Henderson. And like I said, if you have any questions along the way, just stop me. Okay, so his father, John Audubon, who is pictured there on the left, was a French sea captain. He met Audubon's mother, who was a French chambermaid, on the way to the island of Hispaniola, which is now present-day Haiti. He started an affair with his mother, and then a few months after she landed on the island, she lost her job at the plantation that she was working at and sought refuge with John Audubon at his plantation. She gave birth to John James Audubon on April 26, 1785. Since he was born illegitimately, he could not take on his father's last name. So he was born as Jean Rabin, taking on his mother's last name. Of course, Jean Audubon later adopted John James formally and changed his name to Jean-Jacques Audubon. And eventually when John James would come over to the United States, he would change it to a more anglicized name, and that's how we get John James Audubon. It's always an interesting fact. A few years after John James's birth, his father took his son from Haiti to England and introduced him to his wife. Her name was Anne Moynette. Yeah. Yeah, but you would think that this woman seeing John James and his half-sister Rosa coming to live there at her home, you would think most women would be very upset about that. Their marriage was more of a business arrangement, but she loved the two children. She didn't have any of her own, and it was just an opportunity to raise them.
Was his real mother then, was she African American or what? Was
Well,
she a black woman?
That is actually something that many people assume, but there has been genealogical research that shows that she was actually from France, was white.
Maybe she was a governess or something.
Yeah, she came over to work at one of the plantations, and so there is some people that want to believe that Audubon was mixed race, but historians don't think that's true. So Audubon and his half-sister Rosa, she was the daughter of another one of John Audubon's mistresses there on the island.
That's because he was gone all the time.
Yes.
The conversation we had.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so the two children grew up under Anne Moynette's influence. I didn't say this, but John James's mother died about 6 months after his birth, so she was no longer in the picture. But they grew up there in France during the middle of the French Revolution. There was a lot of violence going on around them, and John James's schooling was often interrupted because of it. His stepmother also kind of spoiled him. She didn't make him do his schoolwork. She didn't make him do anything he didn't enjoy doing. So he writes in his memoirs that he spent a lot of time out in the fields and the woods, observing birds, collecting shells and rocks and things like that, and learning to draw. And that would be a good preparation for what his life's obsession would be later on. He also, when he was about 12 years old, his father wanted him to go into the French Navy and to start, a career in that. But John James was actually prone to seasickness, so he could not follow through with that. By the time
He was only 12?
Wow. Yeah, they
They
started that.
apprenticed on, didn't they?
They did. By the time that he was 18 years old, the French Revolution was over and Napoleon Bonaparte was coming into power, and he was looking for young men to draft into his armies. And so John James is 18 years old, his father sees what's coming, and he decides that his son really would not make a good soldier. He did not want him to be used for cannon fodder, which is basically what Napoleon was wanting all these young men for. So his father got a passport forged to send him to America to get out of the danger of being drafted. His father had a farm called Mill Grove in Pennsylvania, and so he thought that he could send his son over to Pennsylvania. His son may learn a trade or may become independent, because that was also something that his father was afraid of, that because he had been so spoiled by his stepmother, that he would never learn to be self-sufficient, and his father would be paying for him the rest of his life. So when he came over here to the United States, he came to Mill Grove Farm, and about 6 months after he arrived, the Bakewell family moved into the farm next door. John James met the oldest daughter, whose name was Lucy Bakewell, and this is a picture of her when she was 45 years old, but we don't have any of her as a younger woman. So he fell in love with her, and there was kind of an issue with getting her father and his father to agree to the marriage, because he didn't have a business, he didn't really have any independent wealth, but he really wanted to marry this girl. At the same time that he was living at Mill Grove, he was also going into the woods and hunting, drawing, studying birds. In our collection at the museum, we have this drawing that was done when he was 19 years old at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. It's of a willet. And you can kind of see at this point, his drawings are not as developed as they would be in the Birds of America. He's just trying to get the basic proportions right and all that, but you can see the beginnings of that. So Audubon ended up going back to France to talk his father into letting him get married. His father decided that the only way to solve the problem was to partner him up with another young man who could go back with him to the United States and start a business. This other young man named Ferdinand Rosier had a good head on his shoulders. His father thought that the influence of this other young man could help Audubon become more responsible and therefore more likely to be able to marry. So they were married in 1808. I know some people have asked about his wife. She was a very well-educated woman. Her father had believed that women should have an education just like men, so she had actually studied science and math and other subjects that a lot of other women did not have. When they got married, they ended up moving from Pennsylvania to Louisville, where Audubon and Rosier were starting a mercantile store. And so this quote is another one of those ones from him looking back on that time, and you can see that he said, "Our pleasures were those of young people not long married." When they had their son, Victor Gifford, it was just enough to them to have a child that would smile at them. That was their pleasure. Victor Gifford was their eldest son. He was born in Louisville in 1809. And while they were living in Louisville, the business was doing okay, but there was a lot of competition from other shopkeepers and that sort of thing. And so about the time that he met Alexander Wilson, who was another ornithologist, a bird scientist, the business was looking like they needed to relocate. In 1810, this guy, Alexander Wilson, came to Louisville, and he sought Audubon out to see if he would purchase a subscription to his work, American Ornithology. And the reason that this meeting was so important is that Audubon had never considered the idea of being able to publish his drawings. He had just been working on studying birds and drawing them just for his own pleasure, but then here this guy comes and he's seeking out subscribers to pay for that work. And we actually have a print from that work, and you can see here that the bird is kind of static. It's just there, kind of flat. This was the prevailing way that scientific illustrations were done at the time. Audubon would go on to make this into more of a form of artwork and expression. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But Audubon ended up not doing a subscription to Alexander Wilson's work just because it would have been about $120 in that time, and that was way too much when you could get like a hotel room for $1. You could get a dinner at a restaurant for 36 cents. Like $120 was way too much. So shortly after Audubon had this meeting with Wilson, which kind of planted the seed in his mind about what he could do later with selling subscriptions to his work and trying to publish his drawings. Shortly after that, they ended up coming to Henderson to try to open up a new store here and reach a market that really had not been tapped yet. And so this is one of my favorite illustrations, like I was saying to some of you, of Audubon. It's showing him here in Henderson. He's in his log cabin drawing birds, and there is Lucy in the background with one of their children in her arms. Audubon, in the time that he was here in Henderson, he was a shopkeeper, and he worked on trying to make that business work, but he was also still keeping up with his bird drawings. And this actually shows his method of drawing, which I talked about with some of you before the meeting. So he would take a wooden board that had a grid pattern on it and pose the birds onto it with metal pins. And so then he would take a board himself with a piece of paper with the same grid pattern drawn on it and look to see where the lines and the curves and all of that with the birds matched up on his grid.
So he had figured that out himself. That was not a prevalent way of doing anything.
Right, he came up with that. He actually came up with it while he was a young man in Pennsylvania. Yeah. So, this is a picture of his two sons. While he lived in Henderson, his two oldest children, Victor Gifford and John Woodhouse. Victor Gifford is right here. John Woodhouse was the younger son right there. These paintings were done by Audubon in the 1820s. Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that he could also do portraits.
Wow, he was good.
Yeah, yeah. So Victor Gifford was born in Louisville in 1809. John Woodhouse was born in 1812 in Henderson. And so while he and Lucy and the boys were living in Henderson, they did accumulate a lot of friends in the area. They lived sometimes with Dr. Rankin and his wife, Elizabeth Rankin Page, or Elizabeth Speed Rankin, never mind. And this is a picture of their house here. Not Audubon's, but Dr. Rankin's, and they spent quite a bit of time. When Audubon had to go out on business trips and trips, hunting, Lucy and the boys would often stay with their friends there. This taxidermied bird was actually done by Audubon and given as a gift to Dr. Rankin. We have that on display in our museum. And then this picture of Larkin Towles was a person that Audubon knew in Henderson. This was done by Audubon and given as a gift. And while Audubon was living in Louisville, or in Henderson, of course, he was still working on his bird drawings, trying to further develop his technique. And if you remember the willet that he had back when he was 19, compare it to this from 1815, you can see how much that he's developed in those years. And this is actually an original drawing by him that we have on display in the museum right now. So this is kind of a fun story to tell. Around 1812, Audubon had done so many drawings. He said that he had about 1,000 birds depicted. And he was getting ready to go to Philadelphia on a trip, so he decided to put all these drawings into a trunk to keep them safe while he was gone. When he returned from Philadelphia, he opened up the trunk, and a pair of rats had decided to get into the trunk, chew it all up, and make a nest for themselves and their babies. And so, Audubon, was of course devastated by this, because that was years of work, so many depictions of birds, and he was depressed for a few days, but then he decided, I'm just going to pick right back up, and I'm going to just start this all over again, make them better than they were. And that really tells you something about his character, because that would come up over and over in his life, where he would have a setback and say, okay, I've had the step back, I'm going to persevere and continue on with what I'm doing. This is a Japanese print telling the story of that event. It was from 1878, and by that point, of course, he was famous all over the world, and it was illustrated in a Japanese book. So just to tell you a little bit about Audubon's life in Henderson, he couldn't get away as much as he wanted to go search out the birds and draw them, so he decided to bring the birds to him. And around his house, he actually had a menagerie of different birds. One of his pets was a wild turkey that he tamed, and it lived on the property. It would chase people around. It became kind of the talk of the town. It would get up and go fly into the woods and come back at night. Eventually, went into the woods and somebody shot it accidentally and brought it back to him. Another pet that he had was a trumpeter swan. And this was kind of a mean bird from the accounts I've read. It would chase anybody around, the family, neighbors, other animals. It would fly up during the day and go, swim in the Ohio River, come back at night. And what's interesting is, these are both depictions of the turkey and the trumpeter swan that eventually made it into the Birds of America. But, he was, even then, wanting to see these birds up close and keep them. But he also had like a pond that had fish and turtles. He loved turtle soup. And he kept, horses, hogs, dogs, that sort of thing. Okay, so another incident that happened while he was living in Henderson, he often attracted kind of eccentric people that would come visit him. And this guy, Constantine Samuel Rafinesque, was a scientist who was looking to study the fish of the Ohio River. He was kind of an eccentric fellow. He didn't really use soap, and he had holes in his socks. He just didn't really care about that stuff. So he came to Henderson, and he was told to seek out Audubon. And so Audubon, he liked to tell tall tales. He also loved to play pranks on people. And one of the pranks that he played was to tell Rafinesque all these stories about these fish that didn't exist. And one of those fishes is the devil jack diamond fish. And it was a cross between like an alligator and some other kind of fish, but he told him that its scales were so hard that they were bulletproof. And so this poor guy, who was kind of naive, believed him. It ended up in his notebooks, and he published accounts of it and gave them scientific names.
I haven't seen it ever, but he
No.
Fishes of the Ohio.
And the one in the lower corner here, the big-eyed jumping mouse, is another one of those things that he decided to tell. Yeah.
Dribillus. And this was before those power plants that they said dumped all the pollutants in the water. There's no excuse for these things. No mutations.
Another story that I don't have an illustration for, but he was returning one time from back east, I think from Louisville to Henderson, and of course he would walk that usually. And so he had a companion on that trip who was also kind of a naturalist, studying things, and he thought that a skunk was a squirrel. And Audubon let him think that, and said, well, here's the way to catch it. And so the guy went to